Dr. Pat, that's wonderful. And thank you, Dr. Patrick, for changing up with me from Friday night. And I want you all to know that so many of you have been coming up to me and saying you're so glad that I'm here, that I made it. And I happen to have been in the hospital on Wednesday night, and as Jean pointed out, she who must be obeyed insisted that I drive over here for Thursday and I want to be here. Such a hard thing, but all of you who have said to me how grateful that you are that I'm here, I want to let you know how grateful I am to be here. Probably more so than you could ever imagine. And we can't go on without first recognizing Dr. Pat and Leanna and the great work they've done on this process. So I suggest what a magnificent, magnificent turnout. What a great conference. And it's so important for us to have these conferences. It really is. It's so incredibly important for us to come together magnetically, to be able to join and re-remind ourselves of why we're here and what we're doing. You know, one of the things that I'm doing a lot of work on is joining and bringing together all forms of denominations for the purpose of creating a world that works for all. And what I'm discovering when I travel around the world is that the vast majority of people want the same thing, no matter what religious denomination they happen to be connected to. I'm having no trouble whatsoever. We've just made an agreement with the American Baptist Association, Dr. Forrest, out of Nashville, Tennessee, and we're going to go back there. We canceled our conference because of their legalized discrimination that they were putting out in the state of Tennessee, but we're going to go there and have a dialogue with them. The Pentecostals, the Methodists, the Catholics. We're really making connection with people, and what we're doing is we're connecting with them because what we're aware of is that there is a conscious majority. There is a group of people that exist on this plane and on this planet right now that know that the world can be different, and know that we can transform and change what is happening around the world. And what we need to do is we need to unite and recognize and awaken ourselves to that consciousness. We need to re-remind ourselves that this is not a dream, it's not Pollyanna, it's not impossible. That what we can do is we can create a world that works for all when we come together in that unity, when we come together in that connectivity, and when we remember what our purpose, our job, our principles, and our values are. You know, we are a cutting-edge theology. Whether you like it or not, whether you want to accept it, we're not mainstream. Amy was reminding me of that I'd said that quite some time ago. We are a group of people who are coming together that are on the cutting edge of leading people into the consciousness of awareness and awakening. That's what we are. We are awake, we are alert, and when we come together here, we're re-reminded of that so that what we can do is step forward. Because all week long, what you've heard being said and discussed here has been really the trauma and the drama that we see in the world around us. And our intention sometimes is to fall into that direction, to fall into that feeling and fall into that consciousness, and therefore become part of the problem, not part of the solution. We simply fall asleep, and then suddenly what we're doing is we're talking about the presidential election race in the United States. I'm a Canadian, I can talk about these things. All the other ones up there were American. I can talk about Donald Trump. But I won't. But we begin to see, as Dr. Carroll shared on the first night that I was here, the three-ring circus. We begin to see that the main stage is actually the stage where the majority of us are doing the work and the art of love. The work and the art of being connected and being together and knowing the truth and flowing through, catching each other in perfection. And as Dr. Carroll pointed out, and then you have the clowns on this side, and you have all the lion tamers and the suppressors on the other. And so what we have is we have this opportunity to move through, but we're in a very unique time in the world today, a very unique time. Dr. Jean Houston mentioned it last night. We are in a time when we need to really be alert and step forward to let people know that we know. Because what we can do through that is we can share that information with the people around us. The people in your community, the people in your neighborhood, the people at your work, they do not want anyone to starve to death. There's no one out there who wants violence and war. And yet somehow or other we seem to have these things, and it's only because we fall asleep and fall into the fear, the zeitgeist of fear, that is motivated and moved throughout. And as a cutting-edge philosophy, it's important that we do not succumb to that. That we allow ourselves to be able to lead from our principles and from our values and from the truths that we know to be true. I'll tell you a story, is that about, I guess, 15, 16 years ago, my daughter and I used to take my daughter out on a camping trip every summer until she got a boyfriend and he started to take her out, but it's okay. He's a nice guy. I've got grandchildren now to look forward to. So, but I remember I took her through the Broken Group. Does anybody know where the Broken Group is? It's off the west coast of Vancouver Island, about 15 kilometers. It's just this gorgeous area that's made up of about 100 or so islands that are placed all throughout the coastal area. And you get out there in kayaks. And we went with my brother-in-law, my sister, and my niece, and Kelsey and I, my daughter. And Kelsey and I had a double kayak. And I'm talking about a real kayak. I'm not talking about one of these ones that let water in. I'm talking about skirts and everything else, sea kayaks. And my brother-in-law and my niece were in another double, and my sister was in a single. And we spent 12 days kayaking the Broken Group. And we traveled through it. It was the most glorious trip. It was just absolutely beautiful. If you ever want to find a sacred site, that would be a place to go to. There were areas where we went between islands, and the islands might be as wide, only as far apart as that end of the hall to here. And you'd go through them and you could see, it was like being in a river, and you could see in the big cedar trees where the native Canadians had, they didn't bury their dead, they hung them from cedar crates from the trees. And so you could still see the cedar crates. And you'd come around a corner on an island, and what you'd see suddenly is an opening with a midden where the natives used to live, and there would be their totems that were fallen over. And it was just a magnificent place. The beauty was incredible. And every morning what we would do is Kelsey and I would set the tone, the intention for our day. So we would say, today what we're going to do is see joy in everything we see. Today we're going to see beauty. And so we just did this marvelous 12-day trip. It was fantastic. And we went from island to island to island, and usually we would kayak for 2 to 4 hours a day. We'd stop for lunch, and then we'd set up camp and have a leisurely time. And at one particular point, though, we came to an island, and to get to the next one, we had to go a very, very far distance. You couldn't see it when you looked from one island to the other, but we had our charts and we had our compass and we knew where we were headed. And so we knew that if we followed the compass and if we followed the chart, that we'd arrive at where we wanted to go. We measured the drift of the water that was going through so that we could pretty well estimate where we were headed to and how we were going to get there. Not unlike us. Not unlike this teaching. Not unlike how we're moving forward. Because the purpose of this teaching is to transform consciousness. It's to awaken humanity. It's to lift up the consciousness. It's to be creative and intentional about the evolution of who we are. So that what we can do is become awake to what is already true within us and share that with the world. So we transform consciousness. It's our job to transform it. And so what we do is we find ourselves on this island looking off to the south is where we were headed. And we headed off. And you have to be aware that there was a period of time on this when we were moving, and it was called the Coaster Channel, because there were huge swells all the way through it. And at one particular point, I remember, I would be sitting there kayaking next to my brother-in-law and niece, and we could look over and talk to them as we were kayaking. And then one time I looked over and I couldn't see them, and it looked all flat. It looked normal, but when I looked over, I couldn't see them. And then when I looked around a bit, I suddenly looked down, and there they were, like 40 feet down in the bottom of the swell. And so you, whoa, we get some impact of the motion of where we were and what was happening around us at the time. And then other times you would look over and you couldn't find them, and you'd look up 40 feet, and they'd be on the top of the peak as they went through. And so it was really important for us to make sure that we maintained our momentum as we moved through it. That we maintained where we were going and how we were doing it, and that we held our heading exactly as to what we wanted to go. Because if we'd missed this island, which was a relatively small island, then the next stop would have been Hawaii. And after Hawaii would have been Australia. And if we'd missed Australia, it would have been Antarctica. So a wide open Pacific before us, and we knew somewhere out there was what we were seeking. Somewhere out there was the island. And we had a chart, and we had a compass. And there came a time when we were crossing that as we were crossing, we looked behind us and you couldn't see land anymore. And we looked in front of us and you couldn't see land anymore. So we were in mid-ocean, kayaking, trusting our chart and our compass, headed towards some place that we knew was there, that we had faith that was there, and going in that direction. And then the fog came in. The deep, heavy Pacific Northwest fog. And it came in and it was so thick and it was so heavy that you literally couldn't see the head in front of you as you were kayaking. And it was a long kayak, and my beautiful 16-year-old daughter, she did her very, very best, but occasionally you had to stop and take a break. But if you stop in the kayak and take a break, what happens is it bogs down. You have to keep the momentum going, and as soon as it bogs down, you lose your direction, and you start going with the current. You ever gone with the current? And then you lose the direction of where you need to go, and you lose your landing point, because where you're headed to isn't necessarily a sandy beach. All those islands were rocky cliffs on the outside, and there was just beaches that you needed to know where you were headed to get to them. And the fog was there, and it was deep, and the swells were there. And there we were, the three boats out there. And you couldn't see each other anymore, but you could still hear each other. And my sister in the single, bless her, she became disparaged. She became frightened. She became lost. With the whiteout conditions, I'm sure you can understand. So my brother-in-law, Donald, stopped, and we went back, and we tied Pauline onto the back of his kayak, and we headed back and found our direction again and started headed out again. And Kelsey and I could have gone ahead. We could have leapt ahead. We could have kayaked out into the direction that we were headed and get there well before. But instead what we did was we dropped back to make sure they were okay, so we just followed, and it slowed the trip down. And it was scary. It was really scary. In our teaching, we have a compass and we have a chart. And where we are in this time and space right now, in this life, in this world that we're enjoying, where we are is we're in a change of consciousness. We have left one consciousness and we're headed for another consciousness, and we're in the middle of the ocean. What we're doing is we're headed in a direction that we know must be there. A world that works for all, a world that is filled with inclusivity, a world that accepts and celebrates diversity, a world that is based in love, a world where people have enough to eat, where there is no shortages or lack that are made up by the invention of our own fears. So we know where we're headed. We have faith that we can get there, and where we are is between changing consciousness. The consciousness of this island to the consciousness of this island. And we're midstream. And the tendency for some of us is to become disparaged. Not just us in this room, but the conscious majority, which is really so many billions of people on this planet who know what they want, but they become disparaged. And so what we need to do occasionally is stop and tie them to our kayak, so that, we can help pull them and guide them to where they're going. And in turn, when we get disparaged, they can turn and they can tie us up and pull us too. We need to be leaders and disciples. We need to be able to follow and donate ourselves to this cause, to knowing what we're doing. But first we need to know where we're going. And we have a chart. And the chart tells us where we're headed. And you know, there are lots of people in this world who have a chart. For us, our chart is our principles. It's what we believe to be true. It's what we hold to be the reality of life. And it lays there before us. And in the fog, what happens sometimes is you have to stop and you have to bend over and you have to look at it and you have to check it with your compass. And the compass is our faith. And there's lots of people in the world that have faith but no chart. And lots of people in the world who have a chart but no faith. We're blessed that we have both. It's easy to find out what our principles are. Just Google the organizational design model for Centers for Spiritual Living, and it will pop up page after page after page that shows you and demonstrates exactly what this teaching believes in and how to move forward with it. We're doing these themes that we're doing. This year we're doing the 2016 theme based entirely on the principles. Over 200 churches and centers throughout the world are doing the same thing. I know Dr. Pat's doing it here. And what we're doing is we're following the same principle. Why? Because we want to take those principles away from just the intellectual knowing and actually give them where they belong, to the congregations and the people. We want all of us to know what it is. Because what we need to do is we need to develop and build that collective consciousness, and we can only do it by maintaining the principles and maintaining our faith in the direction that we're headed. To abandon those is to float aimlessly. And the next stop is Hawaii, and then Australia, and then Antarctica. And the pathway over there is a challenge sometimes. You get tired. My daughter would stop paddling because she needed something to eat. And so I would have to paddle harder to help support the boat, to make sure the boat worked. And when I needed to check the compass, Kelsey would have to pick up the lap. And so she would have to paddle harder while I had to check where we were going in the fog and what was happening. So there we are, going across. And here we are, going across from consciousness to consciousness, ever unfolding. And you know, I'll tell you something, is that very shortly after that, the fog began to dissipate, and we could see the island off in the distance, and so we made it to the island. And when we got to the island, we pulled our boats up on the beach, and we set up camp, and we just enjoyed a couple of days. We fished, and we watched the seals, and played with all the marine life that was around there. It was a magnificent time and a magnificent thing. But you know, after a couple of days, what we did was we packed up our boat, we put it back in the water, and we headed for the next island. This is who we are. This is what we do. We transform consciousness. We go from one place to another, constantly growing and expanding and supporting each other in how we get there and how we're going to arrive. Not supporting each other because you're a new thought, or not supporting each other because you're a member of a Center for Spiritual Living, although that is probably the key place to be, but supporting each other because you're a human being. Supporting each other because what we're doing is we're moving the consciousness of the world. And if you don't believe that we are a cutting edge, believe me, it is so. The world has transformed drastically in the period of time that I have been involved in this. And since 1927, when Dr. Holmes wrote the Science of Mind text, look at the difference in the consciousness and the evolution of the consciousness that has occurred in this world in the last 100 years. We are not the same people anymore. And we have got there by going from consciousness to consciousness to consciousness to consciousness. And every time we do that transformation, there is the disparagement of being alone and lost. And then the reawakening. And so what we need to do, what we are called to do, we are called to support each other in this growth and this development. We are called to allow each other to know that they are on the right pathway, that they are headed in the right direction, and that what we head for is possible. And we do it by following our principles, by living to the principles, denying, refusing to give up, to lay down, to roll over, or to run away. Instead, what we know is we know what is right and what is true, and I'm here to tell you that so do the Baptists, so do the Methodists, so do the Catholics, so do everybody on this planet knows. So we are the lights that guide. We are right now in the lead kayak, and we've got the world tied to us as we pull and move forward. This is the truth of who we are and what we do and why we come together and why it's so important for us to come together and remind ourselves about it, so that we don't feel like we're lost at sea, bobbing like a cork. There is no need. We believe in an infinite intelligence that is higher and greater than all, that operates and works through us in perfection. We believe that the outpicturing in the world around us is always divine, headed for a greater idea. These are our values, these are our principles, this is what we hold to be true. And when we give it up, what happens is we lose our course, we lose our direction, and we bob aimlessly. So we come together as a community on Sunday morning and at conferences to remind ourselves that there is only one God, and that that God is everyone's God, and that it operates through each and every one of us in its perfection. So this is my message this year. This is my message that I give to you. This is the message of the truth for me at this particular moment. And what I want you to know is that it is a requirement that you, who are sitting in this audience, and me that is standing here, follow our principles. That we quit giving in and giving up. That we quit allowing the zeitgeist of a collective consciousness based on fear and manipulation to guide us and direct us into a belief system that we don't even hold to be true. And so we stand up and we say, no, this is true. No, this is true. And we keep the course, and we keep paddling, and we do it together as one. Thank you so much. I'm so honored. God bless you.